First topic we're going to talk about, we've got two speakers. It's Ian Fedrick and Jack Brown. So both of those gentlemen have been involved in the pharmacy purchasing process for some time and have considerable experience. Ian is AP Group Partner and Queensland NT State Manager and has been selling pharmacies and assisting young pharmacists into outright ownership or as managing partner since 2008, with his career spanning over 35 years. And Jack Brown will be presenting also. Jack is AP Group Partner and New South Wales State Manager who has over 10 years experience in pharmacy sales, and Jack brings extensive knowledge from his previous strategic and project management roles and positions. So to talk us through the process of purchasing a pharmacy, it's over to you, Ian.
Great, thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. I will start this session on the process of purchasing a pharmacy. The following slides detail some key areas of focus to give you your best chance of securing the pharmacy you are seeking, as well as setting yourself up for success within the settlement process. So there's 5 topics we'll cover. First, figures never tell the full story. Then move on to review available information, making offers and strategy, and then I'll hand over to Jack, who'll cover understanding the heads of agreement and your obligations, and be prepared for what comes after the offer is accepted. Okay, so let's start with a few important points as an introduction. Figures never tell the full story. Whilst the data is critical, there's much more to assessing pharmacy than the figures alone. There is no substitute for taking the time to visit the pharmacy you are planning to purchase. By doing that, you'll be able to check out the shopping centre, the strip, the local area, competitors in the area, and you'll get a good feel for the suburb. You know, if it means jumping in your car with your mate or your partner and doing a road trip, I would encourage that, because basically going on to Google Maps or Google Earth and doing it that way, it really doesn't tell the full story of actually being on the ground and walking around and checking out all the area and getting a feel for the place that way. Obviously, the IM or the available information, you should be able to see some additional notes that are there. I would encourage you to read those carefully, because it'll give you some background maybe on the business, give you some information about something that might be happening in the area that's important, events that are critical to the success of the pharmacy. So, you know, please read those, because that will help you when you come to look at the other data. An important fact, community pharmacy, in most cases, 85% of their sales or total sales is coming from the dispensary. So remember that point as you go through and look at the information. Importantly, don't sweat the small stuff. So don't get bogged down in the detail, because there's some key stuff that you should look at. And importantly, what you want to do is back yourself when you're looking at the pharmacy opportunities. Moving on to review the available information. Obviously, there's a lot of key reports and core information. And what I would encourage you, if you haven't already, especially if you're on the journey of looking at purchasing a pharmacy, if you go to our AP Group website and register and sign up, that way you'll get access to all the listings, and you'll have full access, which means you can actually check out what reports and available information you should be looking when you get other IMs from other brokers or directly from owners. So it's a great resource that you should take advantage of. So the key reports would be the profit and loss statement, and obviously it's important to get the most current and up-to-date reports to have a look at. So what you'd be looking for, we've just started September, so you would expect to see the draft or management P&L for 30 June 2021. Besides that, obviously the script analysis reports, I already told you that most of the sales are coming from the dispensary. So you want to make sure you have a good look at those, and obviously that those timeframes match up with the profit and loss statements that you're actually having a look at that. And Robert from Pitcher Partners will come a bit later, but he'll cover some of the key KPIs and industry benchmarks that you should be looking at in those. Importantly, the lease, you want to look at the lease, sublease, any amendments to the lease, and importantly, you're just looking for the schedule. So that'll tell you the terms or the periods of time left on the lease. You want to look for the annual increases and also when market reviews are happening. So, you know, that's really important because it's a large part of the expense of the business. The roster, obviously you'll get a copy of the current owner's roster, but what I really encourage you to do is look at it from your point of view as the owner and obviously a working owner operator, and how you would structure the roster and how would you price the roster, because it's all about how you will run the business, not necessarily historically how the previous owner was running the business. I would also encourage you to start the process of reviewing information as soon as possible, because time is critical. And if you're not getting onto it, there's many others that are doing it ASAP. A couple of bits of words of wisdom. Over-analysis can cause paralysis, so keep that in mind when you're reviewing the available information. Next up, we're going to look at making an offer and strategies there. So it's a big job to identify the right pharmacy, and obviously having the right offer strategy to secure the purchase is another challenge altogether. So what you want to do is you want to basically understand the current market conditions, and obviously you probably be able to achieve that by talking to brokers or other industry leaders. The last 12 months, even more, have really been a competitive environment when you look at pharmacies that come on the market. If it's a metropolitan pharmacy in a good location, we'll find once we list it, we could probably end up with 10 to 12 offers within the first couple of weeks. So that gives you an idea of how competitive it is. So when you come to putting your offer together, you really need to understand those conditions. Importantly, what you need to know is your budget and your financial capacity. And the first place to start there is obviously to talk to one of the bank managers from the banks that deal in pharmacy finance, but importantly, a finance broker, which we have a speaker coming up later, Andrew from AP Finance, and they'll be able to look at what your financial assets are and give you a really good idea of what your capacity is, because you want to be in a position when you do make an offer that you're putting your best foot forward. Because as I told you, there's a lot of competition, and if you think you can put in an offer and hold a little bit back because you'll potentially be able to negotiate with the vendor, you'd probably be mistaken in that when there's a dozen offers, for example, the vendor will instruct us as their broker to probably only go back and talk to the top 2 or 3. So if you're number 5 or 6 on the list, you're not going to get that second chance. So you really need to put that best offer in first to make sure you know, if it's a pharmacy you really want to get, that you're going to at least give yourself the best opportunity. And if you miss out, well, then you know you've given it your best shot. The other part of your offer is obviously the conditions, and what you want to do is make them as favorable as possible. So key things like finance and due diligence period, you don't want to make them too onerous. Look at the timeframes that you need to do those jobs, and where possible, don't add other additional clauses that may detract from the appeal of your offer. because remember, you're competing with multiple other offers from other purchasers. So you want to give your offer the very best chance of actually succeeding. That's it for me, and I'll hand over now to Jack, who'll continue on with these slides.
Just before we move over to Jack, I just had a question. You talked about reviewing some of the data. I had a question about if someone's got more information they want to get, how can they do that?
Yeah, so what I would encourage you to do is to reach out to the broker or the agent where you've got access or got the IM from, and just ask the question. It might be something that they can provide to you or give some clarity or additional information on, but it may be an item. For example, you might ask for something like bank statements or a tax return. They're items that potentially would only come through under the DD. So that's after the successful offer was accepted, and those type of things are the next stage of the process, which we'll cover with some speakers that are coming up.
Okay, and just one other quick, so you were talking about putting your best foot forward. So is it quite frequent that people won't get a chance to submit potentially multiple offers?
Yeah, that's right. So obviously as a broker, we follow the instructions of the vendor. So, if he's in a situation where he's got 6, 10, 12 or more offers, then his instructions aren't going to be for us to go back and to talk to all of those. It'll be the top 2 or 3 potentially that we'll re-engage with and let them know, look, they were one of the top 3 offers that were presented out of a dozen, and enter into a second round of negotiations with them to be able to review or amend their offer to represent to the vendor.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Over to you, Jack.
Okay, thanks, Chris, and hello, everybody. Firstly, please excuse my enormous headphones. We're in lockdown in New South Wales, as I'm sure many of you are, and so I'm working from home, and it's dinner time at my house at the moment, and it sounds like feeding time at the downstairs, so apologies if you hear any strange noises. My 3-year-old's losing his mind, apparently. So I'm going to be talking about the Heads of Agreement, which is the formal offer document that outlines the key terms agreed between the vendor and the purchaser. It's a binding document that details what will be included in the formal contract of sale. You can think of it as the interim summary contract, and there are a number of terms that are contained in the Heads of Agreement, and I'll run through some of those key items now. Just quickly, Chris, am I pinned? So my video is up currently, because I can see Ian, or am I up as well?
Yep, you're up.
Okay,
from my view, yep.
Pardon me, okay. So obviously the Heads of Agreement will contain the price, which will generally be broken down into 3 key components. So these are the goodwill, fixtures and fittings, and the stock. The fixtures and fittings are the physical assets. The goodwill is the intangible asset that can be defined as the value assigned to the profits generated by the business. And the stock is obviously the value of the goods on the shelves. It's important to note that while the stock value will be specified in an offer or contract, the final stock figure is determined by an independent stock take on the eve of settlement. This means you only pay for the stock in store when you take over. In addition to listing the price, the Heads of Agreement will also outline how the payment is structured and when those payments are due. Generally speaking, when your offer is accepted, you'll be required to pay an initial deposit. At AP Group, these are normally $20,000, and all deposits are held in a trust account. For those that aren't familiar, a trust account is a special bank account governed by laws designed to protect the individuals who have money held in that account. Basically, it ensures that the money in that account is safe. A second deposit will be due when the formal contract is executed, and that normally reflects 10% of the total purchase price. The Heads of Agreement will also specify if you require due diligence, and if so, how long you require. Due diligence is when a purchaser has the opportunity to request and review any additional information. The primary purpose of the due diligence is to ensure that the sales information you were provided prior to making an offer is true and correct. Due diligence normally takes 2 to 3 weeks, and will often include requests for items such as BAS statements or wholesale statements or Medicare statements. Purchasers will often engage the services of an accountant to assist with this, and Rob from Pitcher Partners will talk about this in greater detail a bit later on. The Heads of Agreement will also outline whether you require a bank loan to complete the transaction and how long you require to achieve formal approval from the bank. The key component of any finance application is the panel approved valuation. This is essentially an independent assessment of value by an approved third party, which the bank uses to assess a business's ability to service the loan. Again, Rob will cover this off in the next section. The heads of agreement will also indicate whether the purchaser wishes to assign the lease and continue to operate the pharmacy from the same premises. This is what occurs the majority of the time. However, there are instances where the purchaser may choose to relocate the pharmacy to a more desirable premises. This section of the heads of agreement also allows purchasers to specify any lease variations or changes they may like. This is most commonly additional tenure or an extension to the length of the lease to provide greater security. One condition the heads of agreement will always contain is that the purchaser must successfully transfer the PBS approval number so that they can legally trade as a pharmacy and claim for Medicare. This requires the submission of an application to the relevant state authority, the VPA down in Victoria or the New South Wales Pharmacy Council up here, as well as an application to the Department of Health, which was formerly known as Medicare. The heads of agreement also contains the settlement date, which is when the transaction is scheduled to be completed and the change of ownership takes effect. It's in the best interest of both the vendor and the purchaser to settle as quickly as possible. This leads me into the next slide and some advice relating to the settlement process post-offer acceptance. Nick from AP Legal will expand on these points a bit later. However, I think it's worth highlighting them in this section as well. So in preparation for when you do have an offer accepted, there are two key things that you can do. So firstly, please ensure that your selected advisors are pharmacy specialists. It's a unique industry with many unique challenges, and having an industry expert will ultimately save you time and money. Your normal solicitor or accountant may be terrific, and you may have known them for 20 years, but if they don't have a specific experience in pharmacy, then please use somebody else. I'm great at selling pharmacies, but you wouldn't engage me to sell your house. Your key advisors will be your solicitor, who will handle the contracts, lease assignments and applications, your accountant, who will assist with due diligence and the provision of documentation required for finance and lease assignment, and your finance broker, who will deal with the banks on your behalf and manage your loan applications. The quality of your team is paramount, and it would be wise to have them in place before you start making offers so you hit the ground running. Secondly, the process post-offer acceptance is long and involved, so make sure you fully understand the role you and your advisors will play. AP Group uses a settlement timeline meeting to take purchasers through the settlement process and its various stages, the key tasks associated with those stages, along with key milestones that need to be met in order to settle on time. As a purchaser, you are the most critical factor in the settlement process, and your ability to commence key tasks such as lease assignment and the contracts at the correct times will directly impact the timeline. Generally speaking, the longer a transaction it takes, the more problematic it becomes, so it's in your best interest to be well equipped to manage the settlement process. And I think that's it for me, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Jack. I wanted to ask a question in relation to the heads of agreement. Are they binding documents?
Yes, they are. I mean, certainly at AP Group they are, and that's designed to provide security for both parties. So the idea is that once the vendor and the purchaser have agreed the key commercial terms, then the document is executed, then it becomes binding. And that's obviously to ensure that both parties will be investing time and money to reach settlement and working collaboratively. And it's just to ensure that that investment, doesn't go to waste because either party just chooses to withdraw down the track.